memorable moments come into mind when I send Mike Dean out to LA with Scarface and Dr. Dre. And I gave him specific directions to make sure he didn't come back to Texas without that sound that Dr. Dre, had where his records was concerned. I knew when I put on my wax in the club and Dr. Dre done put on their wax, it was much louder and crisp. So I knew he was doing something. So I sent my best man out there to be a spy, and he came back with that information. One can't get stuck in the dinosaur era, and you have to adjust to the new movement that's going on, and it can be rather lucrative. It was very important for me to stay in Houston and stick with, the foundation of my everything. You know what I mean? I'm from Fifth Ward, a place in Houston, Texas, and I was kind of shaped and molded to, stick with where I'm from. Now, in my era of music, the East Coast was real popular, and the West Coast was real popular. So one of the most important events that took place was after my partner moved Rap-A-Lot to New York for 6 months, for me to go down there for 2 weeks and make the decision, oh, y'all trying to imitate New Yorkers. Y'all trying to be this. Y'all trying to follow. Let's go back home and be ourselves. I was inspired by the movement that was taking place at Def Jam. You know what I mean? I knew Lyor Cohen. I met him when he came to Houston, so I had somewhat of a relationship with him. But, what inspired me the most was when I saw the checks of LL Cool J, Houdini. You know what I mean? I saw that money, I saw those checks, and I was like, this is inspirational enough for me to learn everything I needed to learn on my own. And that's the way it went. What I learned from Lyor, what I observed from Lyor was a relentless work ethic. You know what I mean? In the beginning, Lyor was traveling around the world with Run DMC, and it didn't look like he ever went to sleep. So I understood, from observing him, okay, this is a business. You have to do some serious grinding. So from a distance, I was able to observe his work ethic. Having a good team around you is very important. You know what I mean? It ain't no I in we. It's hard to get anything done without the proper team in place. Also having the ability and the gift to place them properly. I tell everybody this story. I got some guys that'll jump in front of a bullet for me. But if I say, watch this $5,000 for 2 weeks till I get back, they may not have the strength to do that. So it's important to have the intuition to not put a person in place, as a running back position when they're a quarterback. Being uncomfortable or going outside my comfort zone was very important. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that begins with having a proper team around you, a youthful team around you that's going to be honest with you. For example, where Drake is concerned, my son was a kid when I was teaching him the importance of a buzz. Now, in the new era where MySpace came into place, that buzz was the truth back then. It was the truth in the MySpace era. And that's one thing about the truth, it don't change. You know what I mean? The lie got to keep changing. So he embraced that same truth, where that buzz was concerned, and brought it back, to the table. And I didn't hear it. You know what I mean? My son, Jazz Prince, I didn't hear what he heard where Drake was concerned. So I had to go outside of my comfort zone to embrace him because I had taught him and to believe that he knew what he was talking about, and he did. No, I had no idea that Rap-A-Lot would become as influential or successful as it is today. All I knew is I was playing on $1 million playing field, and I wanted to become a millionaire to break the poverty curse where my family was concerned. I tell everybody as I travel around the world, Chicago was the first city to embrace Rap-A-Lot. You know what I mean? I'm forever indebted to Chicago for that. And I think it runs deep. You know what I mean? I think there's a connection with Chicago and Houston, or with Rap-A-Lot, that didn't really exist, in the beginning stages around the world, but Chicago picked up on us first, and embraced us, and we took off from there. Yeah, my street team rep was the one that helped bring Do or Die to my attention. You know what I mean? I always had a street team rep, a guy in every city, and we would speak every week about what's buzzing in the city. That was real strong, you know what I mean, for me to know what was happening in different cities. And Do or Die came across my radar, and I immediately flew them into Houston, and I think it was on a Saturday night or Sunday night, and Barry Wise from Jive Records was in Chicago to try and sign them with a briefcase. You know what I mean? Saying he had $100,000 in a briefcase. And I'm in my office trying to close a deal with Do or Die. So they say, oh man, it's Barry Wise on the phone. So I'm thinking they trying to use this as a negotiating tool, right? So I'm like, man, let me see who this is. So I get on the phone, you motherfucker, and where Barry Wise comes. You motherfucker. I'm like, this is a closed situation, Barry. We'll talk to you later. Yeah. When I think about N.O. Joe, I think about that gumbo that he promised me for about 10 or 15 years that I never got. But one of the memorable moments, I'm trying to think of the song that he done with Scarface. You know what I mean? When I heard that song, I knew that he was the right producer for Scarface, without a shadow of a doubt. And it was like confirmation where I never wanted to let him move back to New Orleans. How I met N.O. Joe, I'm not certain. You know what I mean? I think it had to come from Scarface some kind of way, I would think. Now, he may remember those things better than me because I've met so many until I don't really know the details, but it was a blessing to be able to meet the brother. There's a lot of them, but one of the memorable moments coming to mind when I sent Mike Dean out to L.A. with Scarface and Dr. Dre, and I gave him specific directions to make sure he didn't come back to Texas without that sound that Dr. Dre, you know what I mean, had where his records was concerned. I knew when I put on my wax in the club and Dr. Dre done put on their wax, it was much louder and crisp. So I knew he was doing something. So I sent my best man out there to be a spy, and he came back with that information. So my take on how, the business has changed is it's a situation I wish existed back when, in my era, whereas it took me 6 months, sometime working a record a whole year to do some of the same things that they can push a button and do and connect with the world and outside of the United States as well. So that's like, that would be heaven to me, back then. So, I think it's a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? I think, one can't get stuck in the dinosaur era, and you have to adjust to the new movement that's going on, and it can be rather lucrative. With me not being God, it's hard for me to really know, which way things are going. But, as an entrepreneur, I do know, some adjusting have to take place wherever it go. So just having the mind and the openness to adjust means everything. Well, with the Geto Boys, I used to put them to sleep and wake them up. meaning that my hustle was so turned up. You know what I mean? I made sure I dropped them off. I made sure I picked them up, and I fed them throughout the day. You know what I mean? And we would do that 2 and 3 days straight with no sleep. So they may not know the relentless hustle that went into part of my story. Dealing with the mental issues where the Geto Boys was concerned, I tapped into it pretty early and I embraced it because it was part of the ingredients that I want to build the Geto Boys with. You know what I mean? With it being Geto Boys all over the world, I felt like they would be able to relate to these issues as well as the subject matters. So, yeah, that was something that, I wasn't surprised about. It was something that it wasn't easy to deal with, but my mission behind it was so much bigger than their issues, their mental issues. And I was after breaking the poverty curse where my family was concerned. So nothing was bigger than that. Here's a crazy rap-a-lot story. And this one involves Bushwick, right? Me and Bushwick was sharing a room in San Diego. Bushwick, I didn't go out that night. I went in and, you know what I mean, decided to go to sleep. And Bushwick came back with his girl. I'm playing sleep. I hear that door open though, right? I'm playing sleep. So Bushwick, he stand up in the bed and start hitting the girl from the back, right? Bushwick doing his thing. I'm trying not to laugh, right? And Bushwick reached over in her ear, say my name, say my name. So he hit her a few more times, and she wasn't saying his name the way he wanted her to say his name. So Bushwick reached back down in her ear, louder, louder. So that was one of them. At that time, I bust out laughing, you know what I mean? I had to get up and move on at that point. But here's another one that's surround Bushwick and Willie D. Now, we're on the Golden Gate Bridge in Oakland, California, or San Francisco, wherever that bridge is at. They make a $10,000 bet that Bushwick can't jump down from the bridge into that water and make it to the bank. So they serious. No, stop the van. Yeah, stop the motherfucker. They didn't exchange money. Hold the money, hold the 10. So, me sitting in the van with some sense, right? I'm knowing that if this man stopped his van, Bushwick gonna jump. So I asked Bushwick, I say, Bushwick, because Bushwick got short arms, right? I say, how do you swim, on top of the water or under the water? I swim under the water. I say, well, Bushwick, if you jump from up here and you hit that water, you're gonna pop open, man. You're gonna bust when you hit that water like cement. And I said, and the shark's gonna think you're a seal and eat you. So we kept going, and that was a funny story. Everybody heard this story when Bushwick lost his eye. See, a lot of them wraps around, Bushwick. Bushwick, of course, got full of that Everclear one night and went home, and we know he got his eye shot out, right? Because, he wanted his girl to shoot him. The lady didn't want to shoot Bushwick. So Bushwick held her baby out the window from like the 3rd or 4th floor and threatened to drop the baby, you know what I mean? And in the midst of bringing the baby back in and, the lady trying to get her baby, the gun went off and shot Bushwick in his eye. That's how he lost his eye. There's a song called Ever So Clear. It's a true story. Yeah, when I heard Mind Playing Tricks, my mind was playing tricks on me before the song was written. So I definitely felt that it would be a hit. I didn't know the magnitude. I didn't know that would be the song to open every door that I had been beaten on to get respect where radio and video was concerned, but it turned out to be that song. Yo, 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 this Jay Prince coming at you live and in living color with the art and science of respect. I want you to check out 24/7 HH. Here's my 3 keys to success. My first key would be my spiritual foundation. And the reason I give credit to my spiritual foundation is because uh, I wouldn't have had, the faith or the strength to endure the obstacles and different things that was before me if I didn't believe in something bigger than myself. Uh, Number two, I would give credence to my work ethic. You know what I mean? And I say that because if you believe in something, like most believe they can do different things and don't have the work ethic to support that they believe in, then we know the end result of that. It's just a dream with no actions wrapped around it. Number three would be my thinking ability. And what I mean by that, I believe that I have been gifted to some extent of, having enough sense and having the ability to think and research information that's needed to use to conquer my goals that's before me. My biggest business challenge, I believe, was my transition from the streets to corporate America. That was a big challenge to me because, when you get accustomed to fast money and have to transition to some real work, uh, that's a challenge. You know what I mean? That's a challenge because now it's about that grind, and now you're gonna be tested as I was for the next 7 years in the music industry before I saw a profit. So that was a major challenge with a lot of temptation wrapped around it to go back. A big fuck it moment for me was when I had to use my street strength in corporate America to change the minds of those who was trying to fuck me. Yeah. From there they could, you can read in the book to get details on how I changed the fuck it moment to peace, a peaceful moment. One of the biggest mistakes I made in business was relying on someone else to do something that I asked them to do without double checking, making sure that it was done. And I go directly to Vanilla Ice. Vanilla Ice was an artist that should have been mine. I should have reaped the reward from those 12 million or so albums that he sold, but I relied on another guy, my partner, actually, to sign that deal that I asked him to sign, and he didn't. One of the many things that I tell people is I'd rather have and not need than to need and not have. If I lost everything that I possess, own, or have material-wise, I'd do it all over again because I know the formula to success. And in Think and Grow Rich, I learned a lot in that. But in the art and science of respect, I shared a lot of those formulas. Like business and personal is two different things where I'm concerned. But, it's hard to, once you become a man of God, to not hold different values in different things, even where business is concerned. Like, my business attitude was some things, what I mean, I wasn't gonna do because I felt like it would hinder my blessings. You know what I mean? So that's why I would tell a man, I'm not gonna allow, my cheating you or whatnot to cut my blessings off. So it's certain things I wouldn't do. So there's a fine line between the two because, okay, there's a rated R thing that I was off into where music was concerned. I didn't feel like that had anything to do with my spirituality. It was an act. It was art, and one may call that what's the word? Putting it where I want it to be. You know what I mean? But there's a fine line. I'll just leave it like that. Speaking things into existence is very important. Everything I ever accomplished, I prayed for before it actually happened. So, I was speaking it into existence, and not only speaking it into existence, your work ethic to follow that you speak as equally important. If I could invite one person to dinner, it would be my sister. And she passed at the age of 12 years old. I wrote about it in my book. The reason why is our last conversation together was about a vacuum and a house. She wanted to buy my mother a vacuum. I wanted to buy my mother a house. At that dinner, I would like to celebrate me bringing her dream to reality as well as mine with my mother. I would definitely talk about, I had no idea that would be our last night together, so I'm sure it would be a lot to talk about as far as, you know, uh, my accomplishments and different things like that, but that's still a sore spot in my heart to this day, not knowing that would be our last night together. Yeah, my study beyond music was my grandmother, my mother, you know what I mean, my father, the people that was close to me. I didn't read about none of those other people. You know what I mean? I observed a work ethic that existed before me. I observed poverty and the struggles, and that was enough to like inspire me to want to break the poverty curse in my family. I mean, in my book, I wrote about watching O.J. Simpson as a kid because of the things he accomplished. So it was more of watching his house and like, man, I like to have that, the material things. But as far as like studying an individual, never really happened. How I feel things can change in economics where communities are concerned is for like-minded individuals that's from those communities to come together first. You know what I mean? Definitely the ones that's successful, the ones that have made it. You know what I mean? It's important to not abandon the very community that helped shape and mold you and played a real interesting role in who you became. So to turn and walk away from that community is a major reason the community continues to suffer. In my community, Fifth Ward, I live by example. I built a recreation center, which consists of a full court basketball facility, a weight room, a computer room, a boxing gym. We do a lot of things such as Christmas, give away toys. On Thanksgiving, you know what I mean? We give away turkeys and food, feed the homeless. We doing things year round. It's a lifestyle with us. You know what I mean? And I think that's where respect really began. You know what I mean? When each of us that has been successful in that community come back and plant those kind of seeds, then we're doing our part. Like right here in Chicago, I think a major piece of being able to stop that violence is to release Larry Hoover. You know what I mean? Someone who has a voice. Someone who is respected in Chicago and around the world. A lot of people don't want to hear that story. A lot of people feel like, they unforgiving. You know what I mean? They feel like one can't evolve. Other words, you do something in your 20s, it's okay to punish you the rest of your life. But, if that mentality, is almost like a slave mentality. If that would leave, from those in uh, these high places where our communities, speaking like of government and different things like that, that govern our communities. If that would change, I think a lot of this violence and different things like that uh, can change. I feel that rappers can contribute. I feel that they should contribute and help uplift our communities. You know what I mean? They're a product of our communities, so they're not excluded. You know what I mean? I'm not excluded. It's a family thing, and if we all come together and unite that way, it'll be respected even more where the youth is concerned. My biggest pet peeve is the systems that existed even before me. A lot of those systems are the business structures on this is the way it should be, which I went against all of them. You should be happy with this production deal, or you should be happy with this artist deal because this is the way it should be. So I was against them from day one. I'm against them right now. I was against it, with my movement, even moving into publishing where the book thing is concerned. So those are things that I dislike. A lot of times, artists and athletes, what I mean, of color, when the opportunity come before them of reaching and grabbing a significant amount of money, that's a lot of temptation for a person that never had anything. So, it becomes real difficult to try and analyze the art and science behind what I'm giving up, versus receiving. All you want to do is receive at that point. When broke has been your neighbor all of your life, and then you have access at being able to grab a million, that's a lot of temptation, and also it's a lot of it makes sense to a lot of people that never, had any practice, had the opportunity to touch money. Myself, the only reason I didn't fall between that crack, you know what I mean, because it was extended to me over and over again. I had practice, you know what I mean. I was used to touching money. I knew the power of I don't want to say selling my soul, but I knew the power of not, protecting my ass appropriately. Because I don't want to view it as short side. It's just that they ain't never had no money. You know what I mean? And if you ain't never had shit and then opportunity before you is to have, I don't know if that's considered short-sighted. I believe the reason is not more executives of color is because of the lack of leaderships and sacrifices that it takes to become a leader. First of all, I believe it's more followers than leaders. And in order to become a leader, you have to have like a certain stamina. You know what I mean? You have to have a special mind frame where you can deal with obstacles and the different things, challenges that's before you to reach, that point of leadership. And, a lot of people don't have the ability to be that. A lot of people want to be that, I'm sure, but it's certain requirements, ingredients that make up that type of individual. I think that crab in the bucket mentality exists in every genre of music. I think it's disguised differently. It's wrapped in different gift wrap paper in other places versus, hip hop. And hip hop is almost like the hood. You know what I mean? It's the hood, and then you have hip hop, and you have a lot of the same principles because you're dealing with a lot of the same people. So, that's the difference that I see where the two are concerned. Yo, 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 this Jay Prince coming at you live and in living color with the art and science of respect. I want you to check out 24/7 HH. The reason I put the art and science book out myself is because I didn't like the opportunities, the proposals that was being given to me by the publishers. After I had opportunity to check the laws of the land where the book publishing business was concerned. I found out that they were trying to treat me like they tried to treat me when I first came into the music industry, which take the buck of my profit and give me some peanuts. And, I was surprised to see that portrait all over again because, I felt as if I had somewhat of a track record that should have been respected. The book publishing company quickly let me be known that, this is the law of the land where we're concerned. You can have 20 or 25% if you're going to go through our systems. If not, then you're on your own. And of course, I chose to go on my own, which caused a lot of people to not order books, which caused a lot of doors to, not embrace me properly. But, of course, I've done this before. You know what I mean? I blazed a trail where this independent record label thing was concerned. So, I was right at home, and I went straight to work. And some of the first things I done was build a demand, which caused all of those doors to start opening. From the publishers calling me back, wanting to give me a better deal, to Barnes and Noble, everybody putting more respect on the situation. The Art and Science of Respect book is going to be a trailblazer for those that's coming behind me to feel better about putting out a book. You know what I mean? I definitely believe in embracing, possibilities that make sense. So, and most of all, I think what this trailblazing event is going to do is encourage others to release their books. You know what I mean? I think it's going to do the same thing it done for, the Cash Money, the Master P's, the Tony Drapers, all the other different people that's watching that want to do a book, or maybe may be encouraged to do a book from my book to know that they can do it. Well, one of the next things I feel that's going to follow this book is a movie. So I'm looking forward to a movie following the Art and Science of Respect. The Art and Science of Respect is a book that is going to empower people, empower their minds. And, what I would like to see above and beyond one reading this book is to exercise a lot of the ingredients that I put in the book such as, creating a movement over a moment. I think that to really make a change begins with, the people such as myself. I give an example beginning with me. In my community, I wrap action around my words. You know what I mean? I wasn't a person that became successful and abandoned where I was from. And I think, when you get like-minded people together, you know what I mean, with that type of mindset, we would make an impact on our own more so than any outside force. I don't have a problem with someone that's not from our culture exercising their entrepreneurship, where our culture is concerned. But I do have a problem when they don't give back to our culture. And if anything, make one be a culture vulture, then that's how you become a vulture, when it's just all about take and not giving back. If I could talk to the younger me, the younger version of me, I would tell him to go and purchase The Art and Science of Respect. You know what I mean? Go buy that book and study it from the front page to the last page, because if I had a piece of literature like that when I first started, I would have been so, much further ahead of the game, and the obstacles and the mistakes that I had to make, that I wouldn't, it wouldn't exist reading a book like The Art and Science of Respect. So the motivation for The Art and Science of Respect is my people coming to me as I travel around the world, asking me when, what, how did you accomplish what you accomplished? And, I couldn't think of a better way to speak to the mass than in the book. When I was growing up, I did not like to read. You know what I mean? And that's why, I made different statements. A lot of people say if you want to hide something from a nigga, put it in a book. Once upon a time, that was true where I was concerned. But when you know better, you're supposed to do better. And my eyes was, awakened along my journey, and I realized the importance of it. And that's why I tell everybody I read this book, Think and Grow Rich, and it changed my whole perspective where business was concerned. Yeah, I would advise the youth to tap into an OG and get away from that IG. Tap into some sound wisdom from those who, live longer than you, made mistakes, that can really give you some sound wisdom and advice to not go and fall off a cliff that they know to be a cliff that they have fell off or witness, someone fall off. So it's important to not ignore the OGs or your mother, your grandmother, those that love you, that's telling you the truth. One of the things that inspired me when I visited Larry Hoover down here in the penitentiary, a man that had done, 27 years at the time. And I was going through a situation of being attacked by the feds at the time. And to hear that brother, tell me, don't stop swinging at him. Those words, don't stop swinging at him, like fuel my whole movement to the extent where, it's with me all the way to this day. Don't stop swinging, which simply means don't quit, keep fighting. Larry Hoover, what makes him special to me, the leader of the Gangster Disciples, is his thinking ability. The man has a brilliant mind, one of the most brilliant minds I ever interacted with. A lot of people may not have the ability to tap into brilliance because they elevators short circuit to a certain extent. But, the short period of time that I had with, being able to brainstorm with the brother had a lifelong impact on me where his intelligence was concerned. And I can only imagine, him having an opportunity to diversify or make that transition from the streets to corporate America in any capacity, how impactful it would be. I think one of the biggest misconceptions of Larry Hoover is, he's limited to violence. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people try to wrap his whole thinking ability, his whole movement, his whole everything around violence. And that's a major understatement where that man is concerned. Yeah, I would say the same thing. They try to put me in a package around fear. You know what I mean? Fear the man, trust. Can't trust him. All of those things, that's not me. You know what I mean? What I would like them to wrap everything around is respect. And I get along with everybody. Well, I can't credit Harry O for no lessons, you know what I mean, business lessons or whatnot that he's given me, knowing what has kind of taken place where we concerned. But I will give a brother this much credit, you know what I mean? He was a hustler when he was free. So, to see a man hustle like he did deserves respect. Yo, 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 this Jay Prince coming at you live and in living color with the art and science of respect. I want you to check out 24/7 HH.